I made this tire clock and here's some things along the way. I need 48 pieces of wood the exact same size. So this is called a stop block and my saw has a clamp to keep it tight. So I just put the piece of wood right against the stop block and then cut it, and then each piece is the exact same size. I made these marks for my domino joiner, and since I'm going to be taking this apart and putting holes in for the dominoes, I made sure to number each joint so I get the exact one to the exact one. This is a domino joiner and it has this bit that goes back and forth to make these holes, and it makes it really easy to put these dominoes in for glue ups to keep everything aligned. If I'm doing a glue up where the pieces are going to lay against the table when they dry, I put wax paper down because the glue peels off really nicely off the wax paper. When I'm gluing pieces all the same size, sometimes I'll use a clamp to clamp them all together and then spread the glue on all the pieces at once so it's quicker. I glued these pieces of wood together in a circle shape, and to get it all tight, I wrapped this string around it and tied both ends to this stick and twisted it, and it brought everything together tight. I made this piece a little too big and I'm using my table saw sled to trim it down, and I'm glad I made this sled this big because it just fits for this piece. I want to glue this block on here, and these are called bandy clamps. It has this band and it clamps on like this, and the band keeps it tight. I made 4 of these and now I'm going to glue them all together, and once the glue is dry, I'm going to use this circle jig for my router and cut a perfect circle with these. I put dominoes here because when gluing these together, it's probably going to want to slide around, so these dominoes will hold it in place. I think it's easier to clean the glue right after I glue it up when it's still wet, and I just use this paint scraper and an old yogurt container. Some people wait till the glue dries, but I think it's a lot easier to do it now. It says on the bottle to wait at least 30 minutes, but for big glue ups like this, I usually wait overnight to make sure everything's cured. Before I glued 2 of these rings together, I marked the centerpiece. I clamped all these blocks together and marked them all at the same time. And then I have these 2 marks, and now I can square it off so I can get the center mark here. And I'm going to be drilling a hole here. I'm drilling these holes before I cut this out in a circle because with this bit, it's a lot easier to drill on a flat surface than a curved surface. I only want to drill a certain depth, and this drill press has a stop here, so now it only goes a certain depth and each one will be exactly the same. This fits perfect on my drill press with a little bit of room to spare, but I did have to take these 2 handles off, and it still works good with 1 handle. This is a circle cutting jig. I screwed this block in the center because with this piece I had nothing in the center, and now it rides around and I can cut a perfect circle. This bit only goes so far, so I got this extra long bit, and even with that one, I still need to flip it over and do the other side. Sometimes I cut small pieces of plywood to see if I need to make any adjustments with the measurements or angles, and once I have it good, and then we use the real wood. I mark these blocks with this lumber crane, so when I come over the jointer and I run it through, I know which side I did and which sides still need done. I needed to cut these angles, so I put painter's tape on my table saw sled and then glued this block with this instant adhesive, and then I just put the block in there and then cut it with the table saw and then flip it around and cut it again. I'm using my router table to take the corners off these blocks, so it's a lot easier and quicker to turn these round on the lathe. I put a slight curve on this piece of plywood and glued sandpaper to it, and I'm using it to sand this circle. I use this tool to get the exact size of the hole, so then I know when I'm good on the lathe, and I do make it a little bit less just so it's not too tight. I put this block in the center so when I glue the spokes it keeps them at the right height. I cut part of the back of this tire out so I could fit the wood wheel in, and I also put blue painter's tape on here so I didn't get the black part of the tire on the wood. I also put these bolts in for the bracket to hang it on the wall because once I put the wood wheel in, I won't have access to there. Before I cut up this big piece of Padook, I made this sample piece with my circle jig, and this is going to be for the rim of the tire. And I was pretty happy the way it looked, but I am going to make a couple adjustments. I notched this out to save some wood, and it'll be a lot less cutting with my router because I'm going to make these into a ring. I used this piece of cardboard through this whole project to make sure I have all the sizing right. I used it when I made the wood wheel, and now I'm also using it to make the rim to make sure everything will line up. I didn't use dominoes with this glue up. I am simply relying on the glue, and the reason is when I cut out this profile, I didn't want to expose the dominoes because that would be very unfortunate. I used this bit with my circle jig to make this edge keep going down, and every time I move this a little bit and move the depth just a little bit deeper. I use this bit to make this edge here, and then I use this bit to flatten it, and then I use this bit to give it a curve. I already had this for my flattening sled, and I modified it, put this block on and this stop to make these tick marks when I'm adding these pieces of maple wood in there. I thought about chiseling this round part square, but I didn't want to risk breaking this or chipping it out, so I decided to sand these little things so it fits in there perfectly. I tried sanding these with my sander, but since this white wood is harder than this red wood, it kind of left a little lump, so it gets a lot flatter to sand them with a sanding block. I put some finish just on the outer edge here because after I glue that on, I don't want to get any finish on the tire because I'm leaving the tire natural. I'm going to be using this Thick-Sewed to glue this wood ring on this tire, and it says it bonds wood, metal, and fiberglass, so I'm going to make sure to get some wood on wood contact here, but I'm also going to put on the rubber tires just to seal everything up. To make it look like the old style tire, I made these little brackets and made these fake bolts. I put a screw through the bracket and then glued the fake bolts on with this instant adhesive. This is called figured maple, and I want to cut a circle, so I made this cardboard pattern to see what part of the grain I wanted, because it varies from here to over here. These clockworks were designed for a thin clock face, so I have to notch out this block of wood to get it down to thin so I can connect the bolt on here. This is called a French cleat. It's an angled piece of wood that goes against another angled piece of wood, and it hangs on there. This is so you can easily lift it off if you need to change the battery or change the clock mechanics. I turned this on the lathe and then took 80 grit sandpaper in the palm of my hand and rounded the edge on this. Then I trimmed just a thin slice of this to make these fake carriage bolts. I use this furniture butter and put it on and wait about a day and then wipe off the extra, and it gives it a nice finish. I used two different rags to wipe the finish off this. This one you can see is more red because the oils in this wood bleed and I didn't want the red to get on this. This project weighs 107 pounds, so I am making two metal brackets to support this on the wall. I bought this little welder, and I'm not the best at welding, but I'm getting better. I temporarily hung this on my shop wall, and for some reason the brackets got a little bit crooked, so I'm gonna have to make some adjustments. I added this piece of metal to move the bracket down. I couldn't move the bolt because I have no longer access to the center of the tire. I have everything ready for install, and I always do a bag of tools, everything I need, so I can just grab everything and install it real quick. Have my tripod, make sure to video everything. What do you think of this project?